Okay, so tonight we're in Unit 7, obviously, dealing with file I/O, and we've got our final project that's already out there. You guys can see the requirements. Hopefully you're already working on it. Maybe you're already close to being done with it. One of the things I wanted to point out today was a little bit about exception handling from the last unit and file handling from this unit. And while talking about this, maybe it'll give you a little bit of reinforcement on both of those. Won't be a very long lecture, I don't expect, but hopefully it'll, boost your productivity as you try to do the assignment. So I've got a little bit of a stub of a program that I created here. Doesn't really do anything right now. It just does a couple of print statements and has a file variable that it sets to none, so it's not really doing anything. So let's say that we've got this program, and like the comment says, we want this program to simply open a file, print the first line, print the last line, and then exit. Okay? That's all we want it to do. As you can see, it's not exactly what our final project is, but it's got some similarities in what you would have to do to accomplish this. Like, for example, we're going to have to ask for a file name, right? You have to do that in the final project too. You're going to have to open the file, and that's where we'll have some exception handling, because lots of stuff can go wrong when you're trying to read and write files. Python is no different in that regard. And then we're going to have to iterate the lines in the file and do some printing of the lines that we encounter, and then close the file. So those are all things that we'll have to do in order to accomplish this simple, seemingly simple little thing, right? So asking for a file name is pretty easy. I'll just declare a variable file name. It's a string, so I don't have to convert it to anything, right? Please enter the name of a file. So now I have to open it. Do you remember how to open a file in Python? So first thing is we have to import the stuff where file lives. It's in the IO package, and file equals file.open, and we give it the file name we want to open, right? That all looks familiar, right? Because you've all watched the lecture for Unit 7. Okay. But the thing is, that can fail for any number of reasons. What's one good reason why file.open might fail? Come on, that's an easy question. I ask him to enter the name of a file, and then I try to open it. What's one of the first reasons why that might not work? Yeah.
Maybe the file doesn't exist.
Yeah, maybe they typed the wrong file name, or didn't have the right folder, or just a typo. They misspelled the name of the file, whatever. Forgot the file extension on the end. Lots of different things, but the file name might be indicating something that doesn't even exist. Okay, so now we've got to think about try. And the reason why exceptions and file handling often go together is because if you want to know what happened with these file operations, the way the people that wrote that package wrote it is they tell you things that went wrong by throwing exceptions. So it's a good first opportunity, maybe not first, but it's a good opportunity to start learning about exceptions while we're dealing with file handling. Okay, so something that can happen when we do this is file not found error. What do we want to do when that happens? Maybe tell them. If I could type. Okay, so I can't find that, try again. That kind of implies something else too, right? Well, if I'm going to try again, that means I'm going to have a loop. So I kind of hinted about that I was going to do that by putting this file equals none, which is what we would do if we were going to do what for our loop. Remember when we've been doing these while loops, we had something at the beginning to set our initial condition so that it runs the first time without asking them if they want to try again. What did we call that? Close. We call that a priming read, right? We're not really doing anything. We're just manually setting the initial condition. So we prime our loop. So if I say file equals none, then I can immediately turn around and say while file is equal to none, right? All right, well, now I've started a loop, but now I've got all this code down here. I need to figure out all of this stuff is going to be in the loop, right? So I need to indent it. Now it's inside the loop. When it was all lined up against the left, it was not inside the loop. But now that I've pushed it in one, and I don't know if you guys saw that, but many of these text editors, you can select a whole bunch of lines of text with the shift key, and you can hit tab. So I'll hit shift tab and it moves it to the left. I can hit tab and it moves it to the right, all the lines together, and then shift tab to go back. So you can kind of easily move your stuff. That's just an editor trick. And once you realize that some editors do that, you get to where, ooh, I wonder if this editor supports that. Notepad, does it support it? Oh yeah, it does. Wow. Visual Studio, does that support it? Yeah, cool, that does. So you learn these little tricks and things, and they usually transfer to other editors. So it's kind of nice. Okay, so now I've got my priming read. I say while it's equal to none, so the first time it comes through there, yeah, it's equal to none because I just set it to none. So yes, it's going to go into the loop. I ask for a file name. I try to open it. It says, oh, nope, I hit an exception. Hey, I can't find that file. Try again. It comes down to the end of the loop and boop, it goes back around to the top. So remember the three things we got to have for a loop. We got to set our initial condition. We got to test the loop condition, and we've got to modify the loop condition somewhere inside the loop, right, to have a nice functional loop. So do I have all three of those things, or do I need to add something to this loop? Where's the setting of the initial condition? Come on, guys, you know this stuff.
File equals none.
File equals none is setting the initial condition. Testing the condition is right there. Where am I modifying the loop condition inside the loop?
Try.
I'm trying to open the file. And if I'm able to open the file, then file will be set to something. And I'll point out too, that was a very poor choice of variable name because it's the same as this, right? So How about I change that to my file? If I'd have thought ahead about that, I would have done it to start with, so not to confuse you guys. But, you know, my file now, that's the variable name. File is the package that we're using to get the open function. Okay, so I kind of have a working loop now. Handles a file not found exception. It doesn't do any of this other stuff here, but could I run it now and test it? Sure. Yeah, I could run it and test it. Let me run Notepad. This is a file. It's my file and very nice. That's all, folks. And I'll create a folder on my desktop. Call it file stuff. And in that folder, I'm going to put my text file .text. Okay, so I've got a file now. Close that. And now I'm going to save my program in that same folder. File verifier.py. Save. And let's run it. Please enter the name of a file. Okay, what did I call the file?
File verifier.
My text file. So I'll copy that so I don't typo it. Paste my text file.txt. And, file is not defined. Why? I didn't forget to import it. Oh, did I do the wrong library? Is it not import.io? What did I do wrong here? Oh, maybe it's just, I'm stupid. It's just open. And remember, I have to tell it what mode I'm going to open. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Let me run it again. Please enter the name of a file. There we go. So it ran, didn't do much after that, but I didn't throw an exception for file not found error. So let me do this again, run it, and there's my file name, but let me put a typo in it. Okay, so now we know that file doesn't exist. So now I hit the exception, but it doesn't crash my program. It just says I can't find that file, try again, and then it loops back around and says please enter the name of the file. Another typo, so it'll just keep doing it until I give it a valid file, and then it goes on. So I have successfully tested that portion of the code that I have already written. Right? Fixed a couple of syntax errors, renamed a thing along the way. We're being agile here, nimble, modifying stuff as we go, fixing it as we go, but also testing it as we go, right? What else could happen when I try to open a file? And you can Google for this stuff. All I did was I Googled what exception can be thrown from a file open in Python, and it gave me a list of all the exceptions. I don't remember all the exceptions that each of these API. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of API functions, and good luck trying to remember them all. You will eventually remember some of them because you use them quite often. But I can say permission error. So if I try to modify a file that I don't have access to, right? I can say whatever I want to in my print statement, right? Can I simulate that? Let me right-click, properties, and say read-only. So I just made this file read-only. Let's see if that causes it to get that exception. Run. Enter the name of a file. Nope, that didn't do it. Yeah, because I'm opening it for read. So that makes sense. If I say I only want to read it and it's read only, maybe I can change it to write. Let's see if that does anything different. There you go. So if I want to read the file and it's read only, that's okay. If I want to write to the file and it's read only, then Python says, oh, sorry, what was the exception? Permission error. It threw a permission error exception. So then I printed this and said try again, goes through the loop, goes back up to the top, says please enter the name of a file. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've seen that. I'm going to change this back to R because I only want to write to it. I don't want my program to be permanently broken. I just want to illustrate that my code's working. That's another thing that people often do programming-wise, file this away and for the future stuff. But let's say that, I had a syntax error here, but I never did anything to cause the permission error to get tested while I was developing the program. I may never know that that error exists until one of these days when I ship it and some customer at a car dealership opens the program and runs it, and they have a read-only file, and it hits this and then hits the error that I never knew was there, and the program crashes, and now I'm hosed, right? So it's a good idea, even if you're pretty sure you're doing it right, to still test it. Just see the message come out. Try to make sure every line of code is executed at least once while you're under development. Okay, what else? Is a directory error. That's kind of an obscure one, isn't it? Okay, but that's interesting. So if I gave it the name of the folder instead of the file, can we simulate that? New folder. Don't open this. Okay. Run it. Enter the name of a file. Don't open this, which is the name of my folder that I created. No. That threw the permission error. That should have been the interesting. this again. No? Interesting. So it's still trying to give me my my permission error. So we found two ways to get the permission error, but we can't figure out how to do the is a directory error. That worked. Interesting. So maybe we are not doing it right. Maybe we found a bug with Python. Maybe it's a bug with Python on Windows, and maybe on Unix it does work, or Linux. There's other stuff. So in general I/O error, this would be something like if you had a USB drive stuck in there and you were reading files off the USB drive, but then you pulled the USB drive out while it was trying to read the file, you might get an I/O error. Or, you know, if your hard drive was corrupted, or any number of underlying system reasons why it was unable to read from the file or open the file, might cause the general I/O error. And some of these, you know, my previous statement about making sure you test every line of code notwithstanding, you won't be able to simulate all possible conditions when you're dealing with this, but that's okay. You still want to handle the exceptions when appropriate, even if you're not able to anticipate exactly or cause it to happen in your testing. So let's see where we're at. Okay, so that's my entire loop so far. And you can see here's what I'm doing. All from this one line of code, we're executing one simple open statement, and all of these, or any of these exceptions could possibly happen. I guess one of the reasons why I just blinked is it didn't turn this one purple like it did these. So I'm wondering if that's even valid. Ooh, unsupported operation.
I see an unsupported operation exception.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. So I'm going to delete that one. Even though it shows up in Google as something that can be thrown, my editor doesn't like it. Okay, So that is opening a file and handling all the exceptions that can occur from opening. Then we want to iterate the lines in the file. And, okay, so this is one of those things that you'll see lots and lots of different examples out there for how to read data from file. One of the things that I will caution you on is don't fall into the trap of, I try to say this in the final project instructions, but don't read the entire file contents into one variable and then do a bunch of string operations on the variable. That's not what the assignment says to do. The assignment says read each line of the file. And with each line, do something. Those are two very different algorithms. One of them is simple. You just say, what is it? Read all text. And you've got all of the text in there. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to have a while loop. What is it? Is it uppercase or lowercase? My suspicion is it's lowercase. Right? This reads one line of text. But I can't really do it like this. I have to do some other stuff. I have to say line equals none. What does that look like to you? Right?
So you created another loop within the loop?
Loop within a loop. Which is perfectly legal, right? We've already done stuff like that, right? I mean, we've had at least, what, 2 projects now where we had, hey, do a bunch of stuff, and then at the end, ask them if they want to do it again, right? The calculator, several of them. So we're just doing a bunch of stuff, and then we wrap it with an outer loop. Well, now our stuff is going to have a loop involved, and then we're going to wrap that with an outer loop that says, do you want to do it again, kind of thing. So yeah, that's perfectly valid to have an outer loop that opens the file, right? And then keeps asking you for a file name until it gets one that's valid. And then once it gets one that's valid, continues on. Okay, now how does that work? So why am I using this as my loop condition? Isn't that supposed to be asking a question? I could do this a little bit different. Right, I could do it like that. So my priming read now says, read the first line of the file. And then the while loop says, while I got something. The way the read line function works is, if you try to read a line from the file and it has already read the last one, you just get back nothing. Okay. Great, so that's the same thing as saying while line is not equal to, sorry. While line is not equal to none, I got something, well then do something with what you got back. And then down here at the end, I need to modify my loop condition. So what am I going to do to line to make it go around again. I'm going to read the next line, right? And, you know, when we talked about the definition of a priming read before, this is a little bit better example of a classical priming read, because the first read is just done outside the loop to prime the pump. This is an actual read of the file. And then I say, while I got something, do some work, and then read the next line of the file. Okay? That's one way to do this. Another way, so just this is the classical way, but just so that you can put it in the right frame, I'm not trying to confuse you here or give you a whole bunch of different options, but just bear with me for a moment. Let's say I restructure this just a bit. So I have my priming read where I set it to none, and then I say while line is not equal to none. So it's not going to work, right? I will never get into the loop. So my priming read has done the opposite of what I wanted it to do. It met the loop condition the first time into the loop. So I set line equal to none, and line's not equal to none. So it doesn't iterate at all, right? It's a bad priming read. But I can put my priming read here, and it'll do the priming read as part of the testing of the, I mean, another way to write that would be do this, and while that is not equal to none, then do the stuff inside the loop. You see what I'm doing? I'm just kind of putting off the priming read. You know, then I don't even really need this. It's a little bit neater way to do the thing, and also I don't need this now, because when it iterates back around through the loop, the line equals read line is inside the testing of the loop condition, so it's going to do the read every time through the loop. Now, when you're trying to learn how to do loops, that pattern is very confusing. Agreed? Trying to figure out what the heck is going on in that line of code is very confusing. But if you think back to, I'm undoing back to this. This is a lot easier to understand because it's like the examples we've seen before, right? I do my priming read, I test the loop condition, I do a bunch of work in here, and then I do my modifying of the loop condition before it goes around for the next iteration. That's very similar to the previous ones. After you've written this 100 times, loops like this 100 times, you're going to realize, why am I duplicating this line of code? Got the same line of code twice, and we as developers, we hate to type too much. So, man, it'd be nice if there was a way that I could eliminate the duplication. And that's when you start finding these tricks. Well, if I just combine the priming read into the loop condition, I can get rid of having the same line of code twice. So I'm not going to do that for this example. I just wanted to go off on that little rabbit trail and show you that pattern. One of these days you'll come across it, or it'll occur to you to write it yourself, and you'll think, oh wow, that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And there's lots of little tricks and evolutions of your coding style that you'll develop. But for now, we just want to leave it a plain old loop. Priming read, check the loop condition, modify the loop condition. Okay, so inside the loop, I want to do stuff. What's the stuff I'm gonna do for this program? This program says, open a file, did that, print the first and last line. Okay, I could have said, read each line and print the first and the last line. So we've opened the file, we've read each line in this loop, we just haven't done anything with it. Okay, print the first and the last line. First and the last line. Wow. How am I going to know that it was the first and the last line? That's the tricky bit. That's the puzzle. We've now done the boilerplate and we've gotten to the puzzle of this program. How do I figure out, I'm reading line, 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 line. How do I figure out which one was the first one and which one was the last one? I guess that's actually this. Print first line and last line. I can also jump down here and that's easy. So I'll get that out of the way. Okay? So really all I have left to do now is print the first and last line. So let me run it right now, and I'm just going to print line for now. It's not the first and last line, it's just every line, right? So if I run it and I have a runaway. My text file.txt. So did I print anything? Yes, I did. This is a file. It's my file and it's very nice. That's all, folks. That was what was in my file, right? Yep. Looks like it's working. But then it kept going. Right? Forever. Print, 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 print. Forever. Anybody see the issue?
In red, like all the lines, even the ones that doesn't have words.
Okay, so to be able to figure out what happened on this, we're going to have to debug it. You remember the little button up here with the bug? We always use this little green run one. We run it full speed, don't care what happens, right? But I want to watch what happens as it runs. So I can tell you exactly what happened here. It's a very common logical error that you can't figure out often by just looking at your code. You can't figure out by saying, wow, why did it do this? It did the correct thing for a little while and then it just kept going. I don't know why it did that, you say to yourself. So we've got tools that allow us to figure this out, and I'm going to use it. So I say debug. So it comes in here, step over, step over, step over. I'm going to step into my loop. Step over, enter the name of the file, my text file.txt. Okay, it's going to try to open it, step over, that was fine. If I look at my file, let's say view variables. File name has my file name in it. My file, it looks like it's got stuff. It's not none. I don't know what all this stuff means, but it's not none. Okay, we're good. line equals read line. So step over. So now if I view variables, oh, look at that. Line says this is a file. That's the first line of my file, isn't it? So my read line worked. While line is not equal to none, yeah, let's step into this. Line not equal to none? Yeah, line's not equal to none. Print line. This is a file. And then read the next line. Line not equal to none. Print line. Okay, I printed a blank line. We'll figure that out later, but bear with me for now. Keeps going. There's the last line of the file. And it keeps going. So it's reading the line, but it's continuing to loop. So line never is none. What is line? It's not none. It's an empty string. So my loop condition is wrong. So while line is not equal to empty string is what I want. So let me run it again. And that time it worked. It read the lines of code, printed each of the lines. Line was eventually an empty string, and then it exited. I could have sat here and stared at the code for years and never could have figured out why it was continuing to loop after the thing finished. And all it was a simple logical error right there. You'll hit this stuff from like the first week of class, I point out that this little bug icon is up here, and how many of you so far have used that in one of your programs that you were developing? I mean, it's natural. Most of the programs that we're doing are fairly simple, short little scope so that we can illustrate simple points as we're learning to program. But we're getting now to the end of the class and we're doing something that's putting a whole bunch more pieces in place, loops within loops, nested if statements, else ifs, all that. They're getting more complicated. So you're going to get to a point where, like it or not, you're going to need to use the little bug symbol. You might have caught this earlier. I can just get rid of this and say while line. And that works because if remember back when we were learning expressions, we said you can test many of these different types for true false. Let's say I've got an integer and I say, is an integer true or false? Which integers are true and which integers are false? Do you guys remember that? And it came down to, if you have a variable and it contains an integer with a value of 0, that will be evaluated to be false. Any non-zero integer value is assumed to be true. With strings, any blank string is false. Any string that actually has stuff in it is true. So that's why that works. I'll leave it like this for clarity for now. Okay, so now I've got a program. It doesn't do what I wanted it to do, printing the first and the last line, but it does something. It prints every line. That's nice. Okay, so now how do we get the first and the last? We'll do the first one first. Anybody got any ideas? Like you're sitting there thinking about the pseudocode, you're thinking about your flow chart. I want to print the first line. How can I modify this loop so that it only prints the first line? Any thoughts?
Create another variable.
Okay. What kind of variable are you thinking? I like your intuition there. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but how about that? So I create a variable that basically is true or false. Have I printed the first line yet? You know, I'm making it overly large and descriptive on purpose. So I print the first line, and then I set that equal to true. And it's capital T, isn't it? Yeah. False and true. And now I can say, if I have printed the first line yet, if not, or if that is not equal to true, or equals false, all those things mean the same thing, right? If I printed first line yet is false, print the line. And then set it to true, so that next time I won't print it.
Do you need that equals false condition if you already got the equals false up there? If it's already,
Well, these are different, right? What's this one doing?
it's just setting it.
Yes, this is an assignment statement that says take the value false and store it in the variable called have I printed the first line yet. It's an assignment statement. This is not an assignment statement. This is a Boolean expression. This is saying evaluate this question. Anytime you see the equals equals, you're going to get back a true or a false answer. So it says compare these two values, what's on the left and what's on the right, and return true if they're equal. So this is not an assignment statement. This is saying if that is a true statement, then do this, else don't do it. Right. Okay, so I think this will do the first part of this. It'll print the first line. Should we test it?
Yes.
Okay, let's test it. My text file.txt. I printed the first line of the file, set the variable equal to true, read the next line. Have I printed it? Yes, I have. So it doesn't. So this, I would contend, still reads every line of the file, but it only does a print statement if the line that I just read happens to be the first line of the file.
And that's exactly what you wanted to do.
That's exactly what I wanted it to do. But what about the last line? That one's a little trickier. That one's a little trickier. We can do it. We just have to puzzle it out. How do I do the last line? Because after I've read the last line, I read one more line. And that sets line equal to a blank string, which causes me to get out of my loop. So by the time I get down here, like I could say print line. But what is it going to print? You know, this is my loop. I've run through and I've read every line of the file. Great, I figured out the last one because it caused me to exit the loop. And then I print it, but nope, that's not the last line. This is blank. I wouldn't be here to do this print statement unless line was blank. It's not the last line, it's the line after the last line. Make sense? So I can prove it. Is this the last line? So let's run it. My text file.txt. See? Is this the last line? No. It's just an empty string. So we missed it. We passed it. So how are we going to realize that we're on the last line before we are past it? Any ideas? Am I going to need another variable?
Yeah.
Okay, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this is the game. This is programming. This is puzzling it out and figuring it out how you detect these things. So you're going to have this one on the video. You can go back and watch it. I'm not expecting you to just know how to do all this stuff, right? How about I say previous line is blank? Or I'll just, more appropriately, I'll say none. We don't have a previous line yet. We're getting ready to start reading lines, so we don't have a previous line yet. Okay, so then we start our loop. We read the first line of the file. Is it not equal to blank? Yes, it's not equal to blank. Have I printed the first line yet? Nope. Print the first line. I have printed the first line. True. Now I want to say previous line equals the line that I just read. Now I read the next line. I come back around. Okay, here I am at the top of my loop. Right here, line contains the file, the line to be processed. What does previous line contain? The previous line, right? It's just a trick of the sequence, of the order that you do the operations. It's the line that we were working on last time through the loop. We just saved what it was before we lost it by reading the next line. So, what if we print previous line instead of line when we exit the loop? What do you think we're going to get? My text file.txt. Looky there. It's like magic. Okay, I'll clean this up. Last line. Anybody see any glaring errors there? My text file.txt. And there we go. First line, this is a file. Last line, that's all, folks. Very cool, huh? So I would say we have successfully opened a file, read each line of the file, printed the first and the last line, and closed the file. So we got the name of the file, we opened it and handled all the exceptions that could have happened from opening the file. We did a bunch of cool little puzzly stuff, which we started with very simple, and we built it up one step at a time, solving one problem, one puzzle at a time, adding a little bit of code, testing it, fixing the problems. Oh no, it's not supposed to work that way. It's not a none string, it's an empty string, right? We just worked through it. We just worked it until we had all the requirements met and declared victory. Any questions?
I'm confused on how you got the last line printed still.
Yeah, I understand that.
Because I see you put the variable to none, but
I understand that. And the fact that it just popped into my head, no, it didn't just pop into my head. I've literally been solving this exact same thing. I've been at the exact same place you are learning to program 40 years ago, okay? I've been doing this for a long time. It's not obvious. It's not just, oh, pops into your head. You got to think about, how would I do this? I've already read all the lines. How do I get that? What if I wanted to read the next to the last line? Print the next to the last line instead of the last line. Oh, well, I can use a technique similar to this, but how do I modify this to print that line instead of the last line, right? You'll have to just reason that out. It's not just magic, it's structured programming. Assignment statements, if statements, loops, that's all there is to it. Those three control structures mixed and matched in interesting, creative ways produces every software program that you've ever touched on your computer. And you've now, after you finish this class, you've now been exposed to all there is to it. And now you just got to figure out how to get better at it. I've handed you a hammer and a saw, and now you just got to get in there and start chopping away at the wood and figure out how to make cool stuff out of it. Okay?